Lucky to Be Here is a podcast that showcases the lives and experiences of those who took the leap to build their lives and careers across countries. They share their stories, lessons, and advice to show us what is possible and what it takes to be an international student and professional. Because there is a lot that goes into building your own path one day at a time. We're more than just lucky to be here. I'm your host, Dr. Analia Gomez Vidal, and I know what it takes because I have been there myself. Now, I coach and mentor international graduate students and professionals navigating life and career transitions across industries and countries through my company, AGB Services LLC. To learn more about how I can help you move from doubt and overwhelm to taking action with clarity and confidence, visit agbservicesllc.com. Stay until the end of the episode for a special treat, too. Welcome to Lucky to Be Here. I am really glad you are. I am super excited to welcome Elena Hoffer to Lucky to Be Here. Elena is the co-founder and CEO of Alma.me, helping PhDs transition from academia to industry. She earned her PhD in medical sciences from Karolinska Institutet in Sweden and is passionate about empowering early career researchers in their careers beyond academia. With a LinkedIn community of over 125,000, she shares insights that inspire PhDs to thrive beyond academia. Elena, welcome to Lucky to Be Here.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here and really excited to chat with you. Thank you for the invite.
Of course. So, to get us started, tell us a little bit about where you're from, where have you been, and where are you now?
Yes. Okay. Where I'm from, I'm originally from Germany. And spoiler, I'm currently in Sweden. So, what brought me here to Sweden is actually my PhD. But to be honest, I came here for the first time during my bachelor. So, I was born and raised in Germany in a small village, actually, with like around 500 people. And always thought it was so boring. So, I always wanted to move into a bigger city. And yeah, as I started studying at some point, I was like, okay, I need to write my bachelor thesis somewhere. And I decided Stockholm is the city. It was a choice for me made based on language because I knew everyone is going to speak English, which obviously is, I don't speak French, I don't speak Spanish, was a factor. So I came here, fell in love with the city, stayed to do a PhD at the end, and yeah, have been here ever since. And yeah, love it.
How long ago has that been?
Actually, so the first time I came in 2015, but then I went back to do a master's in Germany. So I moved in 2017, so 8 years ago. It's so crazy because I'm like, where did the time go?
Especially with the pandemic years in between, like it feels like time has blurred.
I totally agree. It's like with the pandemic, it's like you kind of like 8 years. Where did these years go? It's crazy. So yeah.
So you mentioned that, like you had this curiosity to have experiences outside of your hometown. I'm curious to hear what sparked that desire to explore places beyond Germany to begin with.
That's actually a very, very good question. I feel like I just wanted to see something different, and I felt like I wanted to see a different culture. And so I wasn't very set on Sweden, or I wasn't very drawn to Sweden because of a specific thing. A lot of people come to Stockholm because of Karolinska Institute, because it's a world-renowned medical university. That wasn't the case for me. For me, the main idea was I wanted to expose myself to something new. I'm a bit of an adventurer. I love to see and experience new things. So for me, it was deeply uncomfortable moving here for many different reasons, but it was the best thing I've ever done. So honestly, if you get a chance to move abroad during your undergrads, during your PhD, postdoc, take it. It's so life changing.
So you mentioned that first you did your experience during college and then you like you went back for your PhD, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how was that first experience of going to Stockholm as a college student?
It was quite mixed. it was, on one hand, I was very, very excited because it was like, for me, it was, Stockholm was kind of a big city. I did live, well, as I said, I grew up in a small village, but then during my studies, I did move into a city, but there were like 100,000 citizens. So, I mean, Stockholm is around a million, maybe 1.5, I think. So it was really, really exciting for me on one hand, but on the other hand, it was really scary because I'm not a native English speaker, and for me, languages don't come easy to me. So I'm not a language person, and for me, it was a big, big challenge to communicate in English 24/7, my entire life, in the lab, in private. So from this point of view, it was a bit mixed, to be
Mhm.
honest.
And as you were going through that challenge, um, what supported you in overcoming that language barrier at first?
What supported me in overcoming it? I mean, I think what really helped me is that I knew I just had to speak in a way. I knew that this was the way in. Um, Generally in Germany, I mean, we don't speak a lot of English. It's movies are dumped, so there is, a lot of. If you talk to Swedish people, they're exposed to the English language all day, every day, because the movies are in English. So as a German, this was a difficult transition for me. I guess it's nowadays also a bit different because people watch English Netflix, and they can watch in the
Mhm.
original language. So I think that has changed. I think for me it was really just exposing myself. I have to tell you, in the beginning, I do remember it quite vividly. I didn't speak so much. I listened much more.
Mhm.
I wasn't, because I'm generally a very social person and I really take part in conversations. And so that was a bit of an interesting adjustment for me, to just need to listen and not be part of the conversation. But at the end of the day, I think what really helped me is to know that this is a necessary step. And I'm very growth minded, and I knew that this is just another challenge that I need to overcome. But I think it's something, the way I felt more comfortable outside my comfort zone.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is like the survival instinct kicked in. And so that paired with your growth mindset allowed for you to kind of like expand that capacity to navigate that situation.
I love the way you framed it. Yes. But I see you're a language person. You take whatever I say and you frame it in very nice words, and you put something around. Yeah.
I am very much a language person. So the other thing that I am curious to hear is, like since you had that experience of, being a college student in Stockholm and then going back as a PhD student, there are different time horizons and needs for those experiences. And I am curious to hear how your first experience as a college student being in Stockholm has been different, like in hindsight.
Compared to when I moved back for my PhD,
Yes.
it has been very different, because putting myself out there first meant it was deeply uncomfortable, but you grow, you learn, you develop. So I've got so comfortable speaking English. The next time when I moved back, it wasn't a
Mhm.
problem at all anymore. I knew the city. I knew the system, because this is also, I mean, beyond the language, it's like navigating a new system, navigating a new tax system, navigating a new housing market. So it's all there, all these small challenges, getting a bank account. No one really knows how to handle and deal with these. So going back the second time, I already knew what I was getting myself into. And to be honest, I also chose Stockholm because I did not want to start completely over again. So I knew I wanted to go on another adventure,
Mhm.
which meant going back abroad somewhere. And I
Yeah.
thought, you know what? I love Stockholm, beautiful city. I have established a friend circle there.
Mhm.
I know how to navigate the system. So it was a very different experience.
Yeah. So it sounds like in some ways, like that first exchange experience was what set up the ground for you to feel more comfortable taking that next step in your PhD.
Yes, so one could say maybe exactly it prepared me to then actually be able to take that next step, because who knows, maybe I would have never, taken that step in a PhD if I never went for the first time, because I would have maybe also felt, on a PhD level, probably they have different expectations in terms of, yeah, English level or as compared to a bachelor student.
Mm-hmm. Um, and, focusing a little bit on the PhD part of it, uh, to what extent was an academic career or, like taking that next step academically on your radar as you were going through, like your higher education journey?
That's a very good question, because to be honest, it wasn't on my radar until I actually did my master project. This is when, for the first time, I had to lead. Well, I worked with a PhD student. I was a master student at the time. She left. She went back to France. The paper was in revision. I was second author, so I had to take over the revision, which
Mhm.
really felt like I was responsible and I needed to drive, I needed to make sure that this gets done. And when I have ownership, I thrive. This is something I love. That's why I love to be an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. And I was like, damn, this is really cool. And I really enjoyed it. And I thought, wow, you can grow so much in this, like lab experience or research experience, because it's such a challenging thing to do. And I kind of like to challenge myself. So it was not on my map, honestly. And
Mhm.
um, I developed that desire while I was actually doing my master thesis project. So it wasn't big, but I'm a first generation PhD. So it's
Mhm.
not that anyone, in my family got a PhD and lived that reality for me.
Yeah.
It's something that developed this desire when I actually was a master student.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I had a very similar experience as a first generation as well. And what I'm hearing is like the learning by doing kind of like fueled that curiosity that kind of like sparked what the next step would be.
Yeah, I totally, absolutely. And also just I knew that if I get ownership and in a PhD project, this is like all you do. You have a question, you try to find answers, which is a lot of problem solving. It's a lot of creativity. And I loved everything. Like the thought about doing this on a daily basis. Yeah, I just loved the thought. So I was like, okay, I think that's meant for me.
And so, as you are describing this, you're also taking me back to my own process of figuring out, okay, like what does the next step look like? And what I am curious in your case is when you started thinking about the next step in your academic career and pursuing a PhD, what were the options that you were weighing in terms of where to go for that PhD?
Yeah, very good question, because I didn't actually address that, but I did do my master thesis project also at Karolinska Institute. So
Hmm.
I came back. It was I did this project in a different group than I did my bachelor project, but I came back for this project to Karolinska Institute, and I knew, I didn't even think if I wanted to do it somewhere else. It was for me clear I wanted to do it in this group, because I knew the supervisor, and it was very important for me to know that I will have a lot of autonomy. I don't like to be micromanaged, and she was very open. There was a lot of um, trust. There was also a lot of money in the group, which gives you freedom to operate, which gives you freedom to experiment. If you have to think twice about every antibody you buy, it limits you really in how big you can think. So there were so many aspects that I liked about her as a supervisor, where I felt we're just going to get along really well. So it felt like the right combination of things at the right time. So I don't think I would have gone out and applied for a PhD, to be honest.
Hmm. So it felt like a natural continuation of what you had already been doing.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And one question that comes to my mind is thinking about PhDs. are a little different in the US and in Europe. And so I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the steps that you had to take to get you started at Karolinska Institutet.
To be honest, it was, I think, a quite straightforward process, because when you start at Karolinska Institute, and it might be the same at all Swedish universities, but I can speak for Karolinska Institute for sure. You, your supervisor, or the person that will be supervising you, needs to show that they have money for 4 years to pay you. So in general, the money, I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, in the
Mhm.
US you have a lot of scholarships, so you go out as a PhD, you apply, and then you become part of a
Mhm.
group, but you bring your own money. This is not the case at all at a PhD level in Sweden slash Karolinska Institute. You come in, it's fully funded, you don't have to worry about money.
Mhm.
You do, of course, sometimes, apply for travel grants and these type of things, or if you want to go on an exchange. So there is a little part of grant writing. In getting started with the PhD, it was relatively straightforward, to be honest. It was an application process. And I can tell everyone, because a lot of people do apply at Karolinska Institute. So if someone listens to this, a lot of candidates are already pre-selected. So if you keep applying and applying and you don't get any callbacks, it's likely not because you're not skilled enough or
Mhm.
anything. I would, and I'm just estimating this, but I would probably say 80% of the positions are already kind of like created for someone in the lab, because
Mhm.
as you know, it's a huge commitment. So if they have a master student they like, of course they will try to keep them on, right? But there is a whole process, because it has to be a fair hiring process. You have
Mhm.
to put the position out, other people can apply. You even need to interview other people, which has happened in my case, but then I was the most qualified, so I was chosen. And from that point onward, it was relatively straightforward. You write individual study plan where you design, the different projects that you want to work on, and then you get approved and you get started, basically. So I don't know how this is different in the
Mhm.
US, if this is a more complicated, but I do know that you guys
Yeah.
do more coursework, which is not the case
Mhm.
in Europe. I mean, we do coursework, we do courses whenever. So every semester we look in the course catalog, which course do I want to take, so you kind of combine it.
Yeah, I'm glad like asked that question, because I was also thinking about the process for the US, and one thing that I tend to advise people is to do a little bit of like that research before applying, of like going through the department, seeing what faculty are working on, and also reaching out to them for informational interviews for whoever is available, to learn more about what they're working on, whether they are taking PhD students for the following cohorts, and so on. Because it depends on the case. There are people who come in with additional funding, for example, like Fulbright scholarships, and so like then they do bring money of their own. But in other cases, the university kind of like covers the tuition and stipend in exchange for you to work as a graduate assistant during certain amount of years. There are fellowships as well, where like you don't necessarily have to work for that stipend. But at the end of the day, because it is an overwhelming process, and I've been in the side of like selecting people coming in, and it's a lot of information. Usually, it's more effective if you are better informed of like who is taking students, what type of research agenda they are like seeking to continue, where you would be a good match to continue moving forward, so that then even when you're writing your material and applying for the programs, you are able to also match that, and really make the case for you to join their program. And that is the way that I have done it myself as well, and guided others through that process.
Yes, I think that's a bit of a different process, because what you do, I don't even remember when I applied. I don't think I, sent in any sort of proposal on what my project is going to be. It was literally my CV and some
Mhm.
other things. I needed to have proof of English, which at this point I got. So yeah, it was a really straightforward process. So it's not at all like that, but I can see. Um, Yeah, I don't, and to be honest, because I was already kind of pre-selected, I don't know what other people do actually in that
Mhm.
process. I don't remember if I even, I don't think I wrote something. Um,
Yeah, in the US, you definitely know all the all the acronyms of like the SOP, the statement of purpose, the GRE for the TOEFL for those of us who are not native speakers.
yeah,
So yeah, it's like it definitely is an involved process, and as you point out too, usually like the PhD programs are longer in the US because we have coursework that is required, and then we move into the dissertation writing. And what tends to happen for a lot of us is that as international students, to signal our capacity as prospective candidates, we also have postgraduate education. So a lot of us kind of like have this like two master's degrees, one from our home country or somewhere else, and then the master's degree that you can get as an intermediate degree in your PhD journey.
but do you need to get that? Because I do know of some, I mean, from my limited knowledge that I have, a
Hmm.
lot of, because it's not very common in Europe. You do a bachelor's and a master's, and then you enroll in a PhD program. It's very, very rare. I remember like the group that I work with. I worked
Hmm.
with as a bachelor student. I worked with Liz, so she was American, and her supervisor was at NIH. She met Liz there, and she wanted to bring Liz back to Sweden. So in this case, I think she was one of the rare cases where, because she only had a bachelor's, she didn't have a master
Hmm.
degree, but because she had worked as a research assistant at NIH, they kind of recognized it at the end. But
Hmm.
I think that's also different, right? Because you guys, you go from a bachelor's directly into a, is it already called a PhD, or is it really
Yeah,
just a coursework?
but usually for domestic students more so than international students, and that's why I make that distinction,
Okay.
because as an international student, if you're coming to the US, you also need to provide additional signals that you are going to be successful and that you're
Okay.
able
Yeah.
to thrive in this
Okay.
environment. And so usually that first master's degree can help bump you up in as a prospective candidate.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
see. You know, one thing that I'm actually, because I think maybe I should mention it in case some, it's interesting for someone, because I think it's also different in the US. Um, in Sweden, as a PhD student, you're employed.
Hmm.
You are an employee. So you pay into your retirement fund, you get unemployment money after your PhD. So you have all the social benefits as a
Hmm.
PhD student, as compared, like postdocs are different. When you come as a postdoc, most of them are on stipends and scholarships. So they're not no employees. They have no employee status.
Yeah, so usually in the US, you come with a student visa, so an J1 or an F1. And as part of that visa, it allows for you to work a limited amount of hours for your sponsor, so the university. And that's
Okay.
how your stipend comes in, because then you work for 20 hours per week as a graduate assistant, either research assistant or teaching assistant, or some other versions like what I used to have back in the day. And so from there comes then the stipend that you use in addition to the tuition costs that usually are covered as part of your package. So yeah, it's very interesting to kind of like think about these differences and what how that shapes the way that you are thinking ahead. So if you go back to that kind of like transition where like you are preparing to go to into your PhD, and you kind of like were, since you were already pre-selected, that was a straightforward process. Yet what is not necessarily straightforward is the fact of like settling in a new city for a longer term rather than the specific time of your exchange program. How did your planning around that change compared to when you were an exchange student the first time around?
Well, it changed in a sense that I was definitely thinking more long term, and because I have lived in the city, you know, doing my bachelor's, doing my master's, and I knew there will be some challenges in terms of housing. It's very, very
Mhm.
difficult to find housing in Stockholm, and you always get short term contracts. Like where I'm from in Germany, you have a contract. with a landlord, you can live there forever. No one is going to throw you out. Here in Sweden, or in Stockholm specifically, you get 1 year contract. So you have to move constantly. And I remember when I started my PhD, I was like, okay, I'm going to look for an apartment. And I found a really nice apartment, and I couldn't believe my luck. It was actually affordable. And they said, you know what? You don't have to move out after 1 year. You can stay here for at least 2 years. And I was like, jackpot. Because I really wanted to find something a bit long term, because it's really not nice to move every year,
Hmm.
and you never really feel like home. And for me, home
Yeah.
is really, really important. Like, my four walls are my sacred space.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just need to feel like it's mine. And I was like, okay, 2 years at least you can buy some things, because it's always furnished.
Hmm.
So you live in other people's furniture. But you can start buying some things and making it a little bit homely. After 1 year, they told me, we're very sorry, but you have to move out. And I will never forget that moment. I cried. And it's so difficult in
Hmm.
Stockholm to get any stability in terms of housing. So what I did plan differently, I was like, okay, if I really stay here for the next 4 years, you know what, I'm going
Hmm.
to buy an apartment. And now you're going to be like, what? Coming from Germany, buying an apartment is a very, it means you're settling. I'm going to stay
Yeah.
here for 20 years. That's when Germans buy an apartment.
Yeah.
What I've learned about the Swedish market is it's very, very different here. The housing market is very dynamic.
Hmm.
So, first of all, housing prices are really, really high. So what most people do, they start small. They buy maybe 14, 15 square meters. They live in there for 2, 3 years. They resell, they make extra money, they go a bit higher. And this is really how dynamic the market is, but there is so little cost associated. I can't tell you, when you go in Germany and you buy an apartment, there are like lots of taxes on it, lots of
Hmm.
legal costs. Like, in Sweden, I will never forget, I bought this apartment. First of all, it's a bidding process.
Hmm.
And it's like the most nerve-wracking process I have ever been into. Well, I got the apartment that I wanted, the one that I still live in. But and then you sit there and they have like a 2-page contract. And I'm like, coming from Germany, bureaucracy is our thing. This would be
Yeah.
at least a 50-page contract. No one understands. 2-page contract. I'm like, okay, cool. You transfer the money, apartment is yours. Here you go. But it's a very different, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very different. So that was something, okay. So this was something that I really needed, because for me, home is super important. So I think this is
Hmm.
one of the things that I did do differently. I wanted to think long term. Where can I live? That was
Yeah.
really, really important for me.
It blows my mind when you're describing this because I can not even imagine like a two-pager that as your contract for buying. Because here in the US, like sometimes resale packages for condos, for example, like are like 400 pages, and that's not even the actual like contract. So I do want to ask you because I think that for many people listening, especially if they are in that process of thinking either about going into a PhD or going through a PhD, like the idea of such a big life milestone as like buying an apartment or buying property feels kind of like completely out of left field. So I am curious, how did you build yourself up to get to that moment?
To be honest, I thought this was one of the scariest things I've ever did, because I just thought, damn, I mean, I don't know how many 100Ks I'm just spending. But then
Hmm.
I said, take a step back. You're not spending, you're investing. I think
Hmm.
that was a real kind of making that mindset shift helped me to go through the process, because for me it was scary as hell. I can't tell
Hmm.
you. It's just, now I feel like, okay, it's so funny how you grow with the challenge. Now I went
Yeah.
through it. Next time I would buy something, I would be totally relaxed, because now I got comfortable in knowing I have a loan at the bank and
Hmm.
I can pay it off and nothing really happens. um so that was actually a like I see like how I have grown through this thing was enormous in a way, because it was just, I can't say anything else than scary. Honestly,
Hmm.
it was scary. And yeah, I thought of it as an investment at the end, because I knew I
Hmm.
can sell this apartment. It's in Stockholm, in the inner city. Of course, it was very mixed feelings, because people talk about bubbles, housing
Hmm.
bubbles, and all of this. So I was like, But on the other hand, I was like, if I'm in the city, people always want to live in the city. I should be able to sell this if I ever need to. And then, of course, knowing that I had support from my family did ease my mind a little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, I can't.
Yeah.
When I think back to the day when I actually signed that thing, I was like, it feels crazy. Yeah.
Was there anything specific in your mind as you were going through that quote unquote craziness that helped you ease that fear?
Um, Actually, I'm not really sure, but I thought that worst case scenario, you can always sell it. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't know. There are, of course, scenarios where you think, what if I can't pay can't pay the loan off? What if I can't do this? But I was in a stable employment, so it wasn't really a worry because in Sweden, if you're enrolled in a PhD, you have a 4 years contract. So I knew
Hmm.
that's kind of like safe. Um, yeah, I think for me, it was really just knowing that I'm not alone in this. I don't think I could have done it. I
Hmm.
don't think I could have mentally done it on my own. I
Yeah.
was really grateful to the support or the support that I received from my family,
Hmm.
and that because my dad, I mean, and my mom, they both had bought something, so they could help me normalize these feelings a little
Hmm.
bit.
Yeah.
So it feels crazy in the moment, but it's actually not crazy. Once you have done it once, you realize it's just life goes
Yeah.
on, and all of a sudden you have this loan on at the bank, but it doesn't really change anything in your day to day. It doesn't really
Hmm.
affect you. So I think I just needed to learn. Yeah, but now I would think now I would completely, like, I have a different perception of borrowing or getting money. Lending, it's actually
Yeah.
lending
Hmm.
money, right?
Borrowing.
Borrowing, oh my god, I lend you something, I borrow something. My
Yeah.
god, this is like something I will never get right. Yes.
But
Yes.
what I like about what you're saying is like, and I think that, like we can, this is a good segue into the next steps in terms of like career exploration and like as a PhD. But what I like about what you're saying is that this was a very purposeful decision that you made because home was such a big value for you that you needed that sense of stability in order to thrive. And so you kind of like had to conquer this small mountain. And now like you're speaking from that experience of like, okay, I expanded my capacity now. So that doesn't feel as big anymore.
Yeah, again, I mean, you summarize whatever I feel. Sometimes I have a real difficulty expressing my feelings, but perfect. To the point, you summarized whatever I tried to say right now.
You're getting a taste of who I am as a coach.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I yeah.
so I do want to, kind of like bring us into the next
Mm.
step. And this is something that we connect a lot over because it's kind of like a shared value and purpose, which is, like as you're navigating your PhD, then you start thinking about what the next step is career wise. And so before we go into what you are currently doing now, my question to you is how did you feel about moving forward in an academic career, and what were the professional options that you had in mind as you were navigating your PhD?
Um, you know, I I realized the lab wasn't for me. I think that's really where everything started. Like where I started to think, okay, what should I do next? Because I realized, okay, I'm not enjoying lab work. I felt it was very isolating. I enjoyed much more working in teams. So knowing that an academic career would have meant to do a postdoc, for another 4 years where you have to do lab work, it wasn't really an option for me. And also considering some other factors, I learned a lot about academia that I think doesn't really align with who I am and what I want in my own life.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I need something else. And it was a bit interesting because in the beginning, okay, you know how to pipette. I was like, okay, maybe I can be a scientist in industry, but again, I didn't want to be in the lab anymore. So I was like, what else is there to be done?
Mhm.
I did know because I always had a really great mentor who did a PhD himself, and he moved into pharma and he climbed the ladder, and he was always a role model for me. So I knew there are other career paths out there. I just need to learn about them. And in order to learn about them, I became very, very proactive because for me, career is like you go to work for 8 hours. It's so important for me that I do something that has meaning and purpose for me. For me, it's not just like I don't want to go to work and just be like, I want to, have a 9 to 5
Mhm.
where I can go home and then just relax. And I'm just not that type of person. So I thought I need something with meaning. But in order to find meaning, you have to start with yourself, right? Because what is meaningful to me is not meaningful to you. So it
Mhm.
starts with yourself. So I went on a journey of discovery, understanding what are the things that I really like. And that was just something I was observant. Like I always, what I never understood, every scientist hates meetings. And I was like, but I love meetings. I don't understand why everyone hates them. For me, this is like my highlight of the week. Coming together with other people, like brainstorming. I'm such an ideas person. Now I finally
Mhm.
understand, like, if someone presents data thinking about the next step, this is when oh my God, yeah, I'm an ideas person. I thrive when I can
Mhm.
brainstorm and when I can be in exchange with other people and just, understanding and learning about myself, what I need to be happy. Um, and as a part of this, I just, joined different organizations because I thought it's good to explore a little bit. And sometimes you need to get out of the thinking and into the doing, because
Mhm.
you can sit at home and think a lot about what you want to do, but sometimes it's just good to expose yourself to other things. So I joined an organization at Karolinska Institute. First I was responsible for social events, and I can tell you I didn't enjoy it. And then actually they talked about, because I had a career section, I was like, immediately I felt so drawn to wanting
Mhm.
to contribute to the career section. So yeah, I became part of the career section, and I literally thrived in that role. I loved it. Like I was really like into. We basically invited speakers who had made the transition to come and talk to
Mhm.
show what is possible after PhD. And I think in the 1.5 years or so that I was with them, I think I invited 10, 15 speakers. Like it was really regular. While doing a PhD, and I think it just shows it must have given me some energy, because I did the
Mhm.
flyers, I did the outreach, I did, it was just like, and I was like, I just felt inside of me when I was in these sessions and I chatted with the PhDs after in the mingle, it just felt deeply fulfilling.
Yeah.
And this is how I kind of, well, to say it very short, I realized academia wasn't for me. I realized I wanted to do something meaningful. In order to get to something meaningful, you need to start with yourself first. And then
Mhm.
I explored, how do career paths outside of academia align with who I am. As an example, I was very drawn towards the career path of, we had a management consultant at McKinsey. And I
Mhm.
thought, oh, how cool, you can travel and you can problem solve and you can do it in a creative way. But it was also like expected from you to work a lot. And that was like a click moment for me. I was like, if I would work so many hours a day for someone else, why don't I just bet on myself? And I will never forget how I walked through this PhD. I also walked in, I didn't know too much about it. I wasn't an immunologist. I pivoted in a kind of like a different field. And I've learned everything to get a very meaningful output. And I thought, a business must be very similar,
Mhm.
instead of a research question, now you solve a problem for in this case PhDs. And this is really how I got where I am today.
Yeah. There is one thing that there are a couple things, right, that you mentioned that are essential. Like a lot of what you're talking about, kind of like the learning by doing and exposing yourself, and really paying attention to that curiosity and that excitement that comes through to give you a sense of where to go. But I think a bigger part of it that I know based on my own experience and from what I hear from yours and other people that we work with is that the importance of the reference points of the role models, right? Like the goal of this podcast in some ways is that as well, because something that I always say is like a way in which like we fail at integrating more career paths and possibilities for people is by kind of like setting academia as the default and everything else as kind of like a black box of something else that you can go figure out. And that's when it becomes like so overwhelming as well for someone who knows that maybe that's not the path for them, but also don't know where to start. And so what I really appreciate is how you're sharing your experience being a vehicle for you to tap into what was exciting to you while also getting to know others that gave you permission to think what's possible.
Yes, exactly. I think, and that's such a, it's a really powerful thing everyone can do. Like if you're right now in your PhD, just start paying attention to what energizes you. You know what really excites you. When are you in your flow? And then it's really just about going out. I talk a lot about informational interviews, coffee chats,
Mhm.
talk to people who have moved into, industry. What are they doing? What does their day to day look like? Could you imagine working in that role? I think that's a really important part. But then at the end of the day, I also want to encourage PhDs not to be afraid to, there is no wrong decision in that sense. I
Mhm.
think what is really important is to understand when you move into industry, quite usual turnaround times are 2 years until employees change. So if you decide to go for a job and you don't like it, it's not like in academia where you're committed for 4, 5, or 6 years. You actually can change.
Mhm.
It's, and I
Yeah.
think that's very important to remember, that you don't have to find the perfect job
Mhm.
as you're leaving academia.
Yeah.
Um,
And there is another side to it that I think it's important for us to mention in this conversation, which is I encounter a lot this idea of if you're switching jobs or industries, you're starting from scratch. And I think that that's also a misconception that potentially comes from this idea that if you're not in academia, then like that's it and you cannot ever come back, which is also not entirely true. But there is this like perception that if you pivot even across industries throughout your career after your PhD, that you have to like start all over again. And I think that it absolutely is a misconception because like you are not a blank canvas. Like you are actually bringing in all of the experiences, the knowledge, the excitement and curiosity that you have built on over the years. And so I think for a lot of people, they also put that pressure on themselves of like, okay, if my next job is outside of academia and I go into a different industry, that's the industry that I have to stick to. And that is also not true.
No, and also, I think it's also really important to recognize, and I don't know how aware most PhDs are, there are certain jobs in industry that require to have a PhD. So you're not starting over, uh, all over again. Especially, I mean, I can talk about the life sciences right now. When you move
Mhm.
into pharma, when you move into biotech, a PhD is often a door opener, and it's often a requirement for certain positions. At least, well, I guess it's maybe in the US relatively similar. In Germany, it's definitely the case. I think it might be the same in the US. I think it's a bit different in Sweden. They have a different thinking around the PhD degree, but yeah, I mean, depending on which field you come from, it may actually be what you need in order to
Mhm.
enter certain industries. So, and you're not starting all over. And even if you move into a different industry, you're not starting all over because you have a lot of transferable skills usually. And I mean, you learn so much. And imagine, when you reflect back, how much you have grown. I mean, you take all
Mhm.
of this into wherever you go. So you're not starting over at all. I always say you're not starting over, you're evolving.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
And usually, the thing that I make the most emphasis in is the way that you tell your story, because like it might not make sense for a lot of people, but it makes sense to you. And so, if you can connect the dots for them, it's going to make sense to them as well. And
exactly. Sorry. Yeah.
in that exercise, I actually wanted to connect the dots on your experience. So, like you were going through your PhD, you realize academia was not the route for you, and like you realize how energized you were, like working in the career space. How did Alma That Me came about?
That's actually a good question. As I said, I organized these sessions and I realized firsthand it was Corona. So we usually had these sessions in person, but because it was Corona, we did it
Hmm.
online. So we had a LinkedIn channel actually already at the time for the organization. So we posted our events online, and everyone could attend from any country. And I realized it's not just a local problem or Karolinska problem. I realized
Hmm.
it's a global problem. And I was like, wow, okay. So there is really something that can be, there is a problem that can be solved or
Hmm.
addressed. And since I was so passionate about it, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be the one changing it. So I really, and I have to tell you, it wasn't very easy in the beginning. I did take some entrepreneurship courses that were actually offered through Karolinska Institute towards the end of my PhD, and it has taught me a lot about how to start thinking about a business, how to validate your idea, how to think of a minimal viable product, all of these things. So once I had that knowledge, I went out and I wanted to connect with other like minded people. It was really important because when you're in academia, you don't really feel seen as a creative entrepreneur
Hmm.
because you kind of, they just think of you as a crazy person who thinks you can change the world. And they're so
Yeah.
factually. And, I was just like, I felt so lonely.
Hmm.
So I was like, I need to find other people who can understand what's happening inside of me, because it's so exciting to burn for an idea and think you can actually change the world. Um, so I went on LinkedIn and I joined founders groups and I actually met other founders literally globally from all around the world. But long story short, I met at some point Angela Breeze through a common connection because he said, I think you two, you should talk because she had a very similar vision, but for high school students, because she saw a very similar challenge with her daughters.
Hmm.
They needed to move while they finished high school. They had no idea what to do
Yeah.
because you can do so many things and no one guides you. So yeah, this is how I met Angela, and together through a very long journey, we did. When I think back of the days of Alma Me, there was no agreement. Angela and I just said, let's do something together. She had the hiring experience. She had, I mean, she worked in industry for over 25 years, hired for over 20 years, and literally her whole job was building high performing teams and
Hmm.
implementing hiring processes. So it was all about team performance. So she came in when companies don't perform. It's mostly a people issue,
Yeah.
often, or a process issue, but yeah, it relates back to people. um, yeah, and I was like, we're a good match. So we offered some free sessions on LinkedIn to educate PhDs on CV writing, hiring. And there was no formal agreement that we would build something together. It was just like two people doing something that we felt
Hmm.
passionate about. Yeah, and at some point, I was like, you know what, Angela? Maybe we should actually do something together. And this is how Almami was born. We realized when we did these free sessions, when people implemented the advice that we gave them, they
Hmm.
actually started seeing results. So we were like, oh, wow, it's actually working.
Yeah.
So how can we make this accessible to more students and in a more structured way? And this is how the company was born, how we thought about, okay, how can we equip PhDs, postdocs? These days we work with tenure professors with
Hmm.
the tools and the knowledge they need to make that transition. And as you said, it's a black box. Really
Yeah.
demystify and help them to see it's nothing you need to be scared about. If you have a strategy and if you have an idea on how to approach a transition, it's not scary. But I think it's of course scary if you don't know how to navigate it, and it just
Hmm.
feels like, oh my god, I'm leaving this environment and I'm stepping into a new
Yeah.
environment and I know nothing about this new environment. And they're all business people, and I don't know how I fit in there.
Yeah.
Um,
And also the something that I focus a lot in my work too that you speak to is that loneliness, right? Like especially when we are the first ones taking several steps, right? And then like you you feel that loneliness deeply, and that in some ways like also fuels you even further to want to succeed and provide that service and really like push forward for that vision. In your case, so you started all of this while you were finishing your PhD. So does that mean that you graduated from your PhD and went into like full-time entrepreneurship?
Yes, I didn't even take a week off, not even a single day. I'm telling you, I ended my contract on the 31st of December 2023. And on the 1st of January, kind of second maybe, yeah,
Mm.
I was already committed completely to Almami. It was
And
crazy, but yeah.
how long has that been now?
2 years, almost 2 years. We're soon having our 2 years anniversary in the new year. Yeah, I think we launched our first. We built a course together. It was the 17th of January,
Mhm.
2024. So yeah, 2 years. It's
So
crazy.
going back to the version of yourself that like first started the journey of really moving abroad from Germany and thinking about what else is out there, what would you like that version to know now?
I would like her to know that you're not alone in whatever you feel. So if you feel uncomfortable with your English, likely other people do too. If you struggle, other people do too. If you feel homesick, it's just you're not alone, and what you're experiencing is human. I think this is something that I would want to know.
Yeah. And the second and last one, we could do a whole other podcast talking about our experiences as entrepreneurs. But um, if you were to meet the version of you who was just getting started with the career development events and thinking, oh, there is something here, um, what would you say to them?
I would say dare to explore and follow your dreams honestly, because you only got one life. So don't put yourself in a box. I think we're sometimes very much like, oh, this is possible, and we build these boxes around us. And I sometimes say it's a bit of our unfair advantage that I don't understand much about business, because for me, there are no limitations. When you talk to business people, they say, like, oh, but you can't do that. And I'm like, what? I didn't even know you're not supposed to be able to do that. So I just do it. So yeah, I would say honestly, dare to chase your dreams. You literally got one life, and of course, in a responsible way. You should have a roof over your head and all of these things. But if you burn for something, give it at least a try, because as people say, you likely regret the things that you haven't done more than what you did. And I can tell you one thing. I think a lot of people thought I'm crazy. Some people thought you did a PhD in immunology, you have all this background, and now you're moving into careers. They thought your degree was a waste. But I never felt this way. And also, I knew even if this business fails, I mean, who can say I tried to build a business? You learn so many skills. I mean, I was like, even if this fails, I walk out. They say you either win or you learn, and I'm totally all. I follow that kind of mantra. You either win or you learn.
100%. Before we wrap up, Elena, where can people find you?
They can find me. So my main channel is LinkedIn, mostly, but I'm now also on Instagram, slowly starting to get more active. I do have my own podcast, specifically focused on careers beyond academia, if that's interesting, post PhD directions. Um, we're on YouTube, but relatively small at the moment, so we're a little bit everywhere. So my main channel would really be LinkedIn at the moment, and the podcast.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your story. And lucky to be here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It has been a real pleasure chatting with you and discussing my abroad experience and learning about the American market too. Thank you.
That is the end of today's episode. And as a thank you for making it this far, here is a special gift. You can use code LUCKY26 to get 20% off when you subscribe to my coaching membership, AGV Lab for Career Explorers. You can book your call to join it using the link in the show notes. Thank you for listening to Lucky to Be Here. I am your host, Dr. Analia Gomez Vidal. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening and leave us your review. You can also get our updates and resources for career development by subscribing to our weekly newsletter visiting agvservicesllc.com. See you next time.